Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the TargetSmart podcast brought to you by TargetSmart. I am your host, Albert Morales. This week, we are joined by someone very special to me because she was once my boss in my initial tour of duty at the Democratic National Committee, Amy Chapman, back in the days of redistricting. I won't say the date because it will date me. Of course, Amy, welcome to the TargetSmart podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know it is a very busy time of the year. We are 39 days out for the election, and you're in Michigan, right there, where I am sure your text messages and your inbox are just blowing up. And just to guess, but it's probably on silent mode, so you can finish one task after the other. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Albert. Actually, today is the first day that people can vote in the state of Michigan because of voting access expansion, because that's what happens when you have a Democratic trifecta here. People can vote 40 days out from the election. So if you walked into your clerk's office today, you could cast your ballot, and a number of people are.
Awesome. I think, we are embarking on one of the most busiest early vote cycles in recent memory. I know we say that every cycle, but this one is really, really big, really important. I'm kind of anxious for 2026 because we have all these governorships and state houses on the line where we can really reverse some of these stupid laws that have been in place by the Republicans. But before I go any further, I always like to try to get our guests, our audience, acquainted with our guests, Amy, and certainly anyone who works in politics, national politics or Michigan politics, knows you as what I call one of the top three, one of the three people in this country who could, if the need arose, you could step in and take the reins of a presidential campaign and make it look flawless. So, on that note, why don't you share with our audience your first political memory and how you decided? Very long track record you have, and our time is limited, but go ahead, have at it.
My first political memory was as a grade schooler in New Jersey, and there was I was in second grade, and they were asking who people were going to vote for, which of course no one in second grade could vote for anyone. And I found out that my class in northern New Jersey, it's changed a lot there now, there were only 3 people that were voting for the Democrat that year, and 2 of them went to our synagogue. So that was my very first memory. My very first memory of actually doing something in politics was watching the Democratic convention in '76 and seeing how exciting it was. And then the next day going into a campaign office for my member of Congress, which was Andy McGuire. And the campaign manager there was Gina Glantz, who went on to run presidentials and many other things, and getting involved with a whole kiddie core of people who were doing voter registration and canvassing and learning about politics at the grassroots level. In New Jersey, the benefit is that there's an election every year. And so the following year, we all worked on a state legislative race, and then Andy was up again. So I had a very condensed time where I really did politics extensively in northern New Jersey. And I think it was, I think it was a good learning experience for what to expect moving forward.
And from there, what would you say was your first real political gig that got you started in the business?
I was on a presidential campaign in '84 for Alan Cranston, and that was my first national political job. I felt like I had to work at the local level before I would be qualified to work on a presidential campaign, which apparently is not true, but I did not know that at the time. And I went to work for Cranston, Peace and Jobs, and wintered in Iowa that year. Went to New Hampshire, worked in D.C., and then went back to D.C. to do work for unions and environmental groups, and then on the road again to do campaign work. And I liked the rush of it. I liked feeling like I was able to make a difference, and that if I, did a good job, you were constantly given more to do and more work. And I felt like this, I'm not a policy person, although I have policy opinions. So I felt like this was my contribution to making the country a better place.
That's great. I mentioned that in the interest of full disclosure, you were once my boss back in 2000 for the Democratic National Committee's attempt at getting involved in the redistricting process. And I think even to this day, a lot of folks that are in politics don't lend redistricting the attention it merits. But I think I want to say I'd like to say that we sort of broke the mold, and from there on, you had subsequent efforts aimed at redistricting, though they were never as consistent as they are today. Because I remember our counterparts at the RNC, they had a shop at the basement of the RNC headquarters where they would spend their days and nights drawing up these crazy maps, and they knew that they got a small percentage of what they were drawing, that would put them in a great position. We've now seen the effects of that, right, from state to state, where these gerrymandered districts just overwhelm us sometimes. So, what are your thoughts? I hate to get ahead of myself here, but really, if you start to think about redistricting and its impacts on November elections, we really have to start thinking about who we're going to position in 2026 so that, come 2028 and, 2030, gosh, seems so far away, but it'll get here. We really need to learn to plan ahead and take over some of these state houses where the state legislature does run redistricting, unlike some states where they have independent commissions. But do you think now that we're in a better place than we were back then?
I do. And, the person you had on the podcast last week, Mart Engel, was a big piece of that in Texas. Sorry for my cat in the background. But
we like cats, remember, in this party.
Yeah, he's right here. I do think we're in a better position, but, looking specifically at Michigan, for example, there was a ballot measure that was on the ballot in 2018 to create an independent redistricting commission, passed overwhelmingly. And with better, I would call them fairer districts. I wouldn't say that. I mean, commissions can do something, but they can't work miracles. But with fairer districts, and then the governor winning by so much, because we have such an awesome governor here in Michigan, Big Gretch. It still only got us to a 1-seat majority in each chamber, which just shows how far we're back on that. So I think the commissions can do a lot, but I think we've seen also in Michigan, the Republicans were trying to litigate it even in between. Or you look like a North Carolina where they did that, and and then the courts upheld them. So it's both the legislature, but also the courts as well. State Supreme Courts, I think sometimes the ones that get the most attention are the off-year ones, your Wisconsins, your Pennsylvanias. But the courts that are on the on-years, and we're fighting that right now. We have a progressive majority, but we want to keep it that way, honestly, through the end of the decade. But you look at these other places where the courts can undo the work that's being done. It is a much more complicated and comprehensive and year-round process than I think that we as a party had been working on. I think there had been work done in the past through Project 500 and Impact 2000 and other groups that had been doing it probably more episodically than they would have wanted to, because I'm sure they would have been happy to continue on. But now with the NDRC and other groups doing it on a year-round basis, I feel like we're finally catching up, but it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, and it's going to take a lot of funders who sometimes veer from election to election and shiny object to shiny object to understand the real importance of consistent infrastructure support, which is the really unsexy thing I've probably done my entire career.
Well, I don't want to say that this is a shiny object, but I did read this morning how the attention is shifting over towards Texas and Florida. I think that is a product of a saturated TV market in states that I won't name. But Matt and I talked about this last week. President Biden came within 3.5 points in Texas, 4 years ago, which is pretty remarkable. And I started studying the polling a couple of nights ago, and I realized that the polling hasn't changed all that much from 4 years ago. The polls I trust really are the University of Texas. If I'm looking at statewide polls.
I was just going to say, if you actually even believe polling these days.
Yeah,
well, like there is so much other information that has to be factored into this. Looking at what your colleague Tom Bonnier puts out, which is actual people voting, or actual people registering to vote, and like the grief he took, and Simon Rosenberg took, and others took when they were like, this is actually people voting, not historical precedent, which, I mean, we should banish the term historical precedent anyway, because I don't think it's existed since 16. No, I agree. I mean, the market is saturated here. And I think that, to me, that is the reason to not silo groups into you're a target state, you're a battleground state, and you're not. Because the only way that states come out of that is consistent support at the ground level, and not, dropping in when you care about a Senate race or dropping in when you care about a governor's race. I mean, I think back to, the Howard Dean era of the 50-state strategy, and that was really controversial, or it really pissed people off. And it just thought, why would that be the case when there's important elections that matter? Like, where do you think the bench comes from? What do you think happens in terms of state legislative work? What do you think happens in terms of state court work? There really is a need at every level. And it is inefficient and ineffective to, shut it down each cycle and start it up again.
Do you think that attitude, Amy, was born from Democrats who are in these decision-making positions, walking into this just assuming that we were going to get outspent every cycle? I think you could argue that we are not exactly at parity with big donors, but I think we make up for a lot of it with small donors. And that's why we've been able to be so competitive in some of these races where, our fundraising, our online fundraising in particular, has kicked up.
Potentially. I think potentially. I just think that sometimes funders think that they've taken care of something. Like, we funded that and now we're done and now we're moving on. Texas has gotten episodic attention and information over the past decade, but I'm sure Matt would feel this way and you feel this way. Think about if it was continual and what folks were able to build. And, I run the Michigan Donor Alliance right now, which is a group of national and state funders at every level to support progressive infrastructure and fill gaps and innovate. And I know there's one in Texas, and she's trying hard to build something that is consistent. And that is, that seems to be a challenge on our side. I think there's sometimes folks that are more transactional in their interest.
Yeah.
Or candidate based. And, at this moment in time, it has to be, you have to have really strong candidates, and we do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have really strong parties, and many states, Michigan included, is fortunate to have a strong party. But then you need a really strong independent expenditure side that really works with validators, groups on the ground, other folks to, build something that lasts beyond one election and then can continue on. So,
which brings me to my next point, which is, when I was working under your leadership at the DNC, I think I could still walk across the street to the Capitol and see a very small percentage of people who look like me. But that has changed over the years because, you gave me my break at the DNC. Over the years, I've tried to mentor as many young people as I could, and both in the political sector, but also in the private sector. Unfortunately, some of my private sector mentees have gone on the other side. Diversity of thought. Who knew? But I think this is. I think it's obvious that our diversity is our strength, but as we get more and more population shifts, whether it's from the AAPI community or Black community or Latino community. What have been your best sort of, I don't know, best practices is a right phrase, but you're in Michigan. There's obviously uh, a lot of diversity, especially in the Muslim in the Arab community. Um, how has someone like the governor been able to bring everyone together? And you look at her numbers; they are just nothing short of spectacular. It doesn't hurt that she's a very sound operative politically, but I think people just have a genuine appreciation for her.
No, I think that's right. I mean, and we are fortunate, all of our statewide electeds, whether it's her or Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who's African American, or Dana Nessel, our Attorney General, member of the LGBTQ community, and Jewish, and Jocelyn Benson, pretty much the best Secretary of State in the entire country. I mean, they all understand that you can't silo people. You can't oh, well, this isn't enough votes, so I can't talk to them. I mean, they are all deeply, deeply, deeply embedded in the different communities, listening to people and not just talking at them. And I think that is, that is part of, besides being savvy operatives on their own, this is part of why they're so successful. I think that sometimes people talk about politics, the science versus the art. I think the people that are successful here are the ones that understand the art of it and not just the science. Michigan is a diverse state, but I think it is not as diverse as people think. We are still 72% white,
Right.
According to the last census, which is more diverse than it was before when it was 76%. But I think that sometimes people see it as just like one big city of Detroit or one big Macomb County Reagan Democrats. And it's really a combination. So we're in a state where, demographics is not yet destiny on winning elections. And so you have to do everything right and not just, well, we're just going to register and turn out people, or we're just going to do this. I mean, the state is 100% registered.
Yeah, which
doesn't mean people shouldn't have it as a part of their programs, but programs drop in and we're going to register 100,000 people. I mean, we're fortunate we're not in a state, unfortunately, like Ohio, where people are being thrown off the registration rolls. And we're also not in a state like a Georgia or an Arizona where tons of people are moving in, because they're not. It's been stable. Population's been stable. And so, what else besides your one trick is there to winning elections here? And I really believe that the governor, lieutenant governor, AG, and secretary of state have really figured it out, as well as our, other statewide candidates. Listen, our Senator Gary Peters, this is his second cycle running the DSCC.
And need to make that a job permanent.
Yeah, which is crazy. Or Alyssa Slotkin, who's running for the Stabenow state, and Debbie Stabenow, someone who from county commission up through Senate has been, a winner here because of how she operates and the political work she does. But, I think someone like Gretchen really has to, she does understand that it's a lot of different things. It's no one thing that anyone does to win here.
Yeah, sure seems that way. I want to talk labor now, Amy. I mentioned earlier how you've led national efforts politically, but also in the growth of the labor movement. It seems like there's been somewhat of a renaissance here as of late. I didn't like to see the Teamsters president speak at the other convention, but putting politics aside, if you're a leader in the labor movement, I guess you're after help wherever you can get it. But what, in your opinion, given your history with organized labor, what's been that magic stick, I guess, if you will, in its recent growth? It seems like you hear people organizing at Amazon, the Starbucks of the world. I hope that movement continues. But what's been that secret sauce, you think?
I mean, to me, the number one job of a labor movement is to organize members and represent them at the bargaining table. And as long as unions do that, as they have been before, but are doing now in industries that, previously had never been an industry, like how long has there been, an Amazon or a Starbucks or other things? So going into new industries and diversification, I think they're going to be successful. I mean, I look at a state of Michigan where the auto workers are the largest union, and they had some legal challenges as well. But under the new president, Sean Fain, it just feels like there's an excitement and an interest. And, if you see one union doing it, then other unions start getting involved and more independents are getting involved. So, if the unions are doing that work of organizing, representing their members are going to understand who best represents them nationally. It's the constant communication. And I feel like for a while there was not enough member to member stuff being done. And when I was at the National AFL-CIO and at the Service Employees Union before that, that was something we really focused on and thought was important, and made a difference, like a huge difference. And I think that to me, that is part of the art versus the science. There would be polling done when I was at the National AFL. They were asking union members, like, what's the most important issue to you? And everything always came back, it's no different, than other people, the economy and crime and, this and that. But then if you look under, it was like Davis-Bacon and right to work and pension reform. There was like other stuff that really appealed. And if you talk to folks about that, that was something that you had because you were a union and you could affect that for the members. And I think there was sometimes people looking just at the top lines and not really understanding what you could do of value that wasn't being spoken about. So I think that has really, when I worked for Steve Rosenthal at the AFL-CIO, he really helped push that type of work that hadn't been done and has continued on with other political directors there. But I feel like, the gap between corporate salaries, the stuff that's going on has been so outrageous that, people had enough in these
Yeah.
industries. And, I wouldn't discount what COVID, giving at least some people a chance to think about it. There was a lot of folks who weren't able to take a step back, who had to go to work every day and put themselves at risk and think about, is this worth doing for that? And so I'm glad that the labor movement is revived. People are working and understanding the importance of collective action. And I think that's only going to be better for us as a country, as well as, for folks in politics who understand that. And there have definitely been folks on the Democratic side that probably haven't done as much as they should have to support working people, the middle class. And hopefully this is a wake-up call for them too.
So, but if I were a betting man, I would say that our brothers and sisters in Boeing are going to get their contract here pretty soon. I sure hope so. Anyway, they deserve it. So sticking with the topic of labor, we're heading into this final stretch, and you can name the states. The list may continue to grow for all we know, right? But Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, they all have a pretty strong labor presence. Could you share with our audience the significance of having an army of union members? And sorry, that's one of my roosters, Willie. He likes to always, without fail, interrupt me as I'm recording this. That's why I go to the city to do it.
I feel like this is like the all animal, of that.
Yeah, you got your cat.
Yeah, I got the cat who's, at some point he says it's lunchtime, so he's reminding me about that. So in terms of the labor movement and what it means, so Michigan is one of those states that if you ask in polls, and we do, are you a union member, a former union member, or member of a union household, it still comes up to be about 30%, which is probably one of the highest in the country. So this matters a lot. And what we know is not just from union work, but other work, and the Obama campaign really helped promulgate this, is, the importance of influence, or people like you, your neighbors, or folks who are in your groups telling you about stuff versus people you don't know, or ads. And so the labor movement and a member-to-member program is critically important in a state where this is 30% of the vote. I mean, I mean, the governor did great, but she didn't win by 30%. So any amount of union outreach is going to be critically important to candidates that on the Democratic side, on the progressive side, that actually believe in what the unions stand for. So, if the unions are to reach out to their members through the UAW, SEIU, AFT, AFSCME, the NEA affiliate, the building trades unions, carpenters. I mean, these are big unions here, and having them talk to their own folks is critically important to making sure they understand what's at stake. Like, why bother voting? Like, is your life going to be better? And I think that is a piece. It's not the only thing, but I think it's an important piece to how we are more successful moving forward.
So I keep reading these reports. We talked about the saturated television markets, which for those who don't follow this as closely, it basically means that there are no more 30-second slots to be had during prime time or whenever people are watching television. Are you seeing the disparity? Looking at the other side of this, on the Republican side, I keep reading that there's very little on the ground efforts on the part of the Trump campaign. Is that real? You're there in the heart of the battleground.
I think this is what people wanted to think in 16.
Yeah.
The challenge was that so much of their stuff was organic.
Mm-hmm.
People really excited and understanding that. And so, no one would ever say that the Michigan Republican Party is like a beacon of anything. I mean, they honestly very nearly had to sell their building and kicked out one party chair just during this cycle.
I forgot how crazy that was.
Yeah, so it's they have a new party chair, and the old one came to the meeting, and they had to have her removed by security. So this is not, anything like it. But the people that are into Donald Trump are into Donald Trump, and so his campaign is, rallies and other things, and we can poo-poo them, but apparently we don't these days. Now we talk about our rallies. So okay, I think there's excitement on both sides. So I wouldn't argue that there's like a huge organized effort, but I wouldn't discount the interest there. There's been a lot of mail pieces about how he's never heard of Project 2025 and, how crazy Comrade Kamala is and that type of stuff that have been coming out. So, I mean, they're still running a campaign.
Right.
With whatever money they have left over from Trump's legal fund or however his daughter-in-law is running the RNC these days. So they're running a campaign. They're on TV. There's there's stuff. I mean, and that's why I think it's still going to be a close race. And that's why we have to work hard. You can't.
I could not agree more. So picking on Hello Cat, what's your cat's name?
His name is Cuddles, and he was named when he showed up 17 years ago on our doorstep by my son. So there you go, Cuddles. Here's your moment of fame.
Hello, Cuddles. Hey there.
So I'm going to put him.
I'm going to have to. I will be sure to tag him when we put out the social media stuff on this.
Yeah, get the rooster out there. So sorry about that.
So sticking on the topic of Michigan, I know we've covered it at length, Amy, but so many of our audience, they don't have time to read everything that is dumped on them on a daily basis or what they watch on Morning Joe. What's one issue or movement that you're seeing there in Michigan that maybe isn't being covered by the media?
I mean, I think there's a couple. I feel like I've had this conversation with reporters. I feel like when they want to talk to students, they go to Ann Arbor or Michigan State for East Lansing. And it's, there are students everywhere and not all of them care about the same thing. And so it's worth getting out of the 2 or 3 main areas and talking to what young people care about, what they're hearing, what they're seeing. So I think that that's important. I think the other part is I mean, thinking any group is a monolith. So, and you had mentioned the Arab and Muslim community, and that is a significant community here. But one of the things I learned in particular when I did the Obama campaign is that the largest group of Muslims are actually Black Muslims, not Arabs. And there are groups of Arabs that are not Muslim, that are Chaldean Christian Iraqis. And so it's not all the same subset. And that, for example, in the Muslim community in Hamtramck, there was a big article about, press around the mayor of Hamtramck endorsing Trump. Well, this is the same mayor a year ago, that Muslim man, and his city council, which is majority Muslim, that banned the gay pride flag. Okay, so these are not necessarily people who are going to be on our side there. And, there are just many different, as people come from different places, there are many different folks on this. So I feel like, categorizing any one group by one thing is not going to be successful. I mean, there are a fair number of Muslims here. Um, I mean, so it's 150,000, 200,000 voters, but
Yeah,
they're not all gonna they were not ever all gonna vote for a Democrat, because no
right.
subgroup has 100%. I mean, some are close, but, one thing I learned is that any group that had Biden won last time by 154,000. Any group that has more than 154,000 is like, "That was us. That was us." Okay? Well, it's not. It is, a combination of a number of different things, and, I work directly with a lot of these groups and have been supportive of them, through our work through the Donor Alliance, and, there are folks who are, Engage is a group that just endorsed Harris and has been doing work. Arab Americans for Progress has been, doing work in the community. They understand that Trump is bad for them, but there's not everyone. There are socially conservative folks, within any community, including the Arab and Muslim communities. And, that just has to be factored in and understood and respected.
Okay, so to be clear, when we hear that, Muslim Americans are 2% of the electorate in Michigan and how they can shift the race in one direction or the other, you're saying that there are Christians, there are, various
Black,
religious backgrounds,
yeah.
Black Muslims. Yeah.
I mean, Keith
And,
Ellison is from Detroit, and he's a Black Muslim.
yeah.
So, um,
I want to talk. I know we're running out of time, Amy, but everyone is always asking me about Slotkin, and you know, I think no one is ever a shoe in until they are, right? But talk about someone with policy chops. She's very young still. Um, I think she's got a very bright future ahead of her. What what would you say to the person on the fence who's wavering on whether or not to send her that extra 25, $50? uh,
well, I mean, Alyssa Slotkin is a beast in the best possible way. This is a woman that, pushed through and won what was a Republican seat for Congress, came back and won in probably one of the most expensive races in the country. Really not just like has the policy chops, but is so smart politically. So smart politically. And but even when she raised, even when there was $30 million spent on a congressional race, she still had to really work hard to do this. I mean, this is I think every race is going to be close. But Alyssa comes from a part of the state which was not where a majority of the votes were, and so she's had to really go out and get herself known, which she has done. And the work she has done has made it possible. And then on the Republican side, I mean, we're in a climate now, and maybe it'll change in 2 years or 4 years, when they get their asses kicked enough, where every Republican to be successful has to be mini MAGA. And so you have a guy like Mike Rogers, who I think was considered a reasonable Republican at some point when he was in office over a decade ago. And all he talks about is like the border and MAGA and other stuff. I mean, that's not a winning message here. That just isn't. And Alyssa's talking about the things that really matter. But, you know, Albert, you and I are not normal. Normal people are worrying about pumpkin spice and, the Kelsey brothers and like all sorts of other stuff that's going on right now. They're not worried about like what's Alyssa Slotkin doing at the border, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just not in their thought process. And so as media has gotten diversified, you can't just put up an ad around if it was even available around the 6 o'clock news and feel like everyone has seen that. So, Alyssa's had to do so many different things that are expensive. And I think that, Debbie Stabenow really busted her ass, but in some ways she made it look easy, even though it wasn't. And so people are like, oh, it's a Democratic seat because of Stabenow. I mean, Stabenow took that seat from a Republican when she first ran. So it's not, this is not an easy seat. And, Alyssa's probably going to make it look easy because she's such a hard worker, but, nothing is done until it's done. And especially with people voting so early, I think people have to change their understanding of timing of when something happens or not, because the timing is it's now. And we have a permanent absentee list. And so those people are voting first and they're voting now. So, it gets more expensive as you go on because you're trying to target people who haven't voted. And that's a smaller subset. I mean, we had in 2020, which was a pandemic, but 70% of the people voted before Election Day.
Wow.
Now it went down to 42% last cycle. Estimates are it's probably going to be between 65% now, between 55 to 65. But that's all these people who will have voted before, either by mail or their clerk's office or an early vote location. So it really changes like a campaign structure and budgeting to understand what that was like. I mean, I first learned that when I worked in Oregon for Ron Wyden, which was the first all vote by mail election there. And it was 3 weeks and it was like Groundhog Day every day. And you got the list, who hadn't voted, how do you target them? Like, okay, go back the next day, get the list and do it over again. And that is in a lot of ways what it's like here now and in a lot of other states. So it really upends how folks think about the big election day. So
we're going to start winding down here, Amy, in the interest of preserving our time. I know, as I stated, you're really busy, but if Vice President Harris called you this afternoon and said, Amy Chapman, tell me what I need to do to close a deal in Michigan. I know we're close, but what would you tell her?
I would have her camp out here. Her and I guess Governor Walz is coming to the big Minnesota-Michigan game this weekend. I guess what I would say is just make sure people are in the neighborhoods voting and, talking to people about voting. I mean, she's been doing amazing events and there's such an energy, but you have to close the deal by closing the deal. And that's being done by person to person contact from folks. You can't do it, and even lawn signs, although I know there's a whole lawn signs don't vote there, but honestly, a lawn sign for Kamala Harris in some of these neighborhoods could make a difference if they were on lawns, not meetings. So I would just say, like, flood the zone, man. Like, flood the friggin' zone with canvassers and signs and other things that people see individually versus just digital or online or otherwise. And that'll make a huge difference here, as well as help, provide some uplift for the rest of the ticket.
Well, Amy, I can't thank you enough for joining the TargetSmart podcast today. I'm going to give you back a few minutes of your time so you could deal with, is it Cuddles?
Yes. Cuddles is, I don't know, an 18-year-old cat who wants lunch. I guess I better listen, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, Albert, it's like such a pleasure to talk to you and, be friends with you. And we worked together a long time ago, but it was such an important experience and we did the right stuff the right way. And, and I'm so happy you're at TargetSmart because I love those guys. And I think that they are really smart in how they do work. And, Tom Bonnier's an old friend as well. And just have so much respect for you and for the folks at TargetSmart. I should probably mention my friend Jamal Bickley King, or he would be mad that I didn't mention him on a podcast for TargetSmart.
No, everyone loves Jamal equally.
We,
But yes, no,
we,
TargetSmart's been a.
we worked together here in '08. I met him during the Obama campaign here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did he have the beard back then?
No. Well, I mean, there were different facial hair things, but but he was a data guy, so we never saw the data guys, right?
Yeah. Well, that's Willie signaling me to shut up and remind our listeners to follow us on everywhere you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, uh, Amazon, Spotify, you name it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We will be back next week, probably not from the farm, but we thank you for giving us, almost an hour of your time. And have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.